Welcome to today's Explainer. We're about to explore the terrifying hidden chapters of our past, stories that prove, without a shadow of a doubt, that reality is often far stranger and, honestly, significantly darker than any fiction you could possibly invent. Okay, let's dive into this. You know, when we learn about the past, history is usually portrayed as this very neat, sterile collection of kings, wars, famous inventions, grand discoveries. But we're going to completely shatter that illusion today. Hidden right there among those well-known events in our textbooks is a literal cabinet of dark curiosities. We're talking bizarre disasters, completely unexplained mysteries, and human stories so shocking they almost defy belief. Act 1. Massive scale nightmares and catastrophic destruction. These are the events that showcase industrial hubris, uncontrollable natural forces, and just how incredibly fragile human life really is. 2000. That number represents the approximate lives lost in a single instant during the 1917 Halifax Explosion. Two ships collided in Halifax Harbor, and one of them happened to be carrying enormous quantities of explosives. The resulting blast was literally one of the largest non-nuclear explosions ever recorded in human history. It triggered a devastating tsunami, wiped out huge portions of the city, and injured thousands more. The sheer scale of destruction was totally comparable to a major wartime attack, all stemming from one catastrophic accident. Now, this domino effect of catastrophe took on an entirely different form in 1816 during what became known as the Year Without a Summer. It all started the previous year with a massive eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia. Volcanic ash absolutely flooded the atmosphere, literally blocking out sunlight across a huge portion of the globe. Temperatures plummeted, snow actively fell during the summer months, crops just entirely failed, and widespread famine set in. Entire communities were forced to struggle for survival through what must have felt like an apocalyptic, never-ending winter. Nature actually delivered another terrifying reminder of its power a bit later, in 1908, with the Tunguska Event. A massive asteroid or comet fragment, suddenly exploded in the sky over Siberia. The force was so incredibly immense that it flattened millions of trees across hundreds of square miles. And the truly terrifying takeaway here? Had that exact same explosion occurred just slightly differently, say over a populated city, the death toll would have been utterly unimaginable. Moving from the skies back down to the streets, we have Victorian London's visceral nightmare, the Great Stink of 1858. Just imagine an exceptionally hot summer where the entirety of a major city's untreated sewage and waste is just baking, right there in the River Thames. It created a stench so unbearable it literally paralyzed the city. But it wasn't just gross, right? These deeply polluted conditions contributed to terrible disease outbreaks, which brutally highlighted the desperate, immediate need for modern sanitation systems. And that brings us to one of the most tragic industrial scandals of the early 20th century, the story of the Radium Girls. Factory workers were handling this radium-based paint, and they were actively told by their employers that the glowing substance was perfectly harmless. Just out of fun, many even painted it onto their skin. The betrayal here is profound. Years later, these women developed horrific illnesses: radiation poisoning, cancers, severe bone deterioration. Their profound suffering did eventually force a change, leading to the strict workplace safety regulations that you and I rely on today. Act 2, Desperation and the Macabre. We're shifting away from environmental disasters now and focusing in on deeply personal, chilling, human survival stories that play out exactly like dark psychological thrillers. And this brilliantly illustrates the really dark depths of human survival. Think about the Donner Party, pioneers trapped by heavy snow in the Sierra Nevada mountains, completely exhausting their food supply until only about half survived. Or consider the whaling ship Essex, which was actually sunk by a sperm whale in 1820, leaving men drifting for months across the vast Pacific Ocean. That's an event that actually inspired parts of the novel Moby Dick. In both of these profoundly desperate scenarios, starving survivors were ultimately driven to the unthinkable extreme of cannibalism just to stay alive. You know, sometimes the macabre is born entirely out of panic. 73. That is the number of people who died in 1913 during a Christmas celebration in Michigan, just because someone falsely shouted fire in a crowded building. There was no fire, but the sheer terror of the crowd caused a massive stampede. 73 people were crushed and killed while trying to escape, and tragically, most of those victims were children. The Italian Hall disaster is just a haunting lesson in how deadly human panic can be. Now we're shifting into the realm of true crime with H.H. Holmes, one of America's earliest and most infamous serial killers. He allegedly constructed what became known as the Murder Castle in Chicago. We are talking about deliberate, highly sinister architectural features here, a literal labyrinth of secret passageways, hidden rooms, and trapdoors specifically designed to facilitate his gruesome crimes. While historians do think some legends have probably been exaggerated over time, the terrifying reality of his calculated murders remains undeniable. Act 3. The absurd, unexplained, and downright bizarre. If the last section was a psychological thriller, these documented events are pure historical surrealism. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer unbelievable mismatch. In 1932, the Australian government officially waged what is known as the Great Emu War. On one side of this conflict, you have fully trained soldiers deployed with heavy machine guns. On the other side, massive populations of large, flightless birds, emus, that were destroying farmland. Despite having literal military weaponry, the emus proved remarkably difficult to hit and eliminate. It ended up being a hilarious, deeply humiliating failure for the Australian government. The birds won. Let's do a rapid-fire run through some really incredible historical anomalies. First, the dancing plague of 1518. Hundreds of people in Strasbourg just started dancing uncontrollably in the streets for days. Some literally collapsed from exhaustion, dehydration, or even heart failure. To this day, it's an unsolved mystery. Mass hysteria, fungus poison grain, we still don't definitively know. Next, the 1876 Kentucky meat shower, where chunks of flesh literally fell from the sky. Scientists later concluded it was likely partially digested material regurgitated by flying vultures overhead. Disgusting, but true. And finally, the 1814 beer flood in London. A massive brewery tank burst open, unleashing a deadly wave, a literal tsunami of hundreds of thousands of gallons of beer that destroyed buildings and killed 8 people. 3. Now, how about a story that sounds completely supernatural? This is the story of John Babacombe Lee, who was convicted of murder in 1885. He was sent to be executed, but the gallows trapdoor miraculously malfunctioned, not once, not twice, 3 separate times. The number 3 became his salvation. Authorities were so completely bewildered by this that they actually commuted his sentence, and he became famously known as the man they couldn't hang. Now, this next one is an incredible testament to the extreme psychological grip of wartime loyalty. Japanese soldier Hiroo Onoda hid in the Philippine jungle for nearly 30 years after World War II had ended. He absolutely refused to believe the war was over, totally ignoring countless peace leaflets and official announcements. It wasn't until 1974, when his former commanding officer was specially flown in to give him a direct order to stand down, that he finally surrendered. Just a mind-bending reality of absolute dedication. So, the crucial point is this. From literal beer tsunamis and wars against emus to the dark tragedies of industrial hubris and sheer human desperation, our past is incredibly complex. These events reveal a darker, vastly more unpredictable side of history that just continues to fascinate us. Reality truly is the ultimate horror writer, and, sometimes the best comedy writer, too. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. We look back at dancing plagues and meat showers with absolute bewilderment, right? But history is being written right now. What completely normal aspects of our modern present day will be viewed as utterly bizarre, unbelievable history centuries from now? Let that sink in. Thank you for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions and keep exploring the fascinating shadows of our world.